Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, it's Slime Time, our first sports game, and a Working Designs RPG. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is June 10th, 1992. This video is brought to you by Athletic Greens. We make sure to eat healthy, we make sure to exercise to be healthy, but sometimes we forget that we can drink healthy. AG1 by Athletic Greens is a daily supplement that simplifies my everyday health routine. It adds 75 different minerals and vitamins to help make sure your body is getting whatever it needs for whatever your concerns are. AG1 has vitamin C and zinc to support your immune system. Just want more energy throughout the day? AG1 has a natural form of vitamin B12, biotin, bioavailable folate, and magnesium. Maybe you just want something to help improve your skin and hair? AG1 contains both biotin and vitamin E. As a personal test, I did some squats. Now I'm pretty frail and weak, so my legs were sore for like a solid week afterwards. Then I did squats again, only this time using AG1 from Athletic Greens as my nutritional drink. My legs were ready to go just a few days later, as AG1 works great for muscle recovery. Now, I'm still pretty weak, but now I can work out more often than I did before. AG1 is easy to work into your daily routine, as all it takes is 1 scoop, 8 ounces of water, and that's it. You can go to athleticgreens.com/projared to get started on your order, and Athletic Greens is going to give you 1 year of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first order. That's athleticgreens.com/projared, or use the link in the description below to get started using AG1. And once again, thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this video. This is either going to be something you've never heard of, or if you have, some neurons are about to be activated. Released this week in 1992 is Todd's Adventures in Slime World for the Sega Genesis. You play as Todd, exploring the slime world. You essentially go from room to room, defeating all kinds of slime creatures while using several gadgets along the way, like a jetpack, shields, and bombs. Rather than taking damage or losing health, Todd gets covered in slime, and pools of water can be used to wash off the slime and keep that jumpsuit clean and to reload. It also features 2-player split-screen multiplayer, as seen in other Genesis games like Toe Jam and Earl and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Rather than simple difficulty levels, you instead chose between 7 different variations of the game. These options include an easy mode, the harder arcade mode, a mode where you don't have any weapons, a time trial, a PvP mode, and a mode with 1 life, 1 death. All of these game modes put Slime World a bit ahead of its time. Imagine if all modern games came with options for stuff like roguelikes and randomizers. That's essentially what Slime World did. Todd's Adventure in Slime World was originally released for the Atari Lynx in 1990, and then it was ported over to the TurboGrafx CD in 1991, boasting new visuals, improved music, and anime cutscenes with full voice acting. Then, when that version was ported to the Sega Genesis in 1992, they got rid of all of that, although they did keep the handy minimap up in the corner. The game is still a bit jagged when it comes to screen scrolling. Understandably, the Atari Lynx version had 8-player multiplayer. The Sega Genesis one, you're gonna have to settle for just 2. Slime World is an interesting example where every different version of it had different box art. The Lynx, the TurboGrafx CD, and the Genesis. And for the most part, I would say they're all equally pretty good. The Lynx version has a horde of slime monsters behind Todd, who has a Giga Chad chin 30 years before I even knew what that meant. The Turbo CD version features more of the cutscene characters in that fantastic early 90s anime style. The Japanese Genesis version of Slime World has Todd shooting an alien's jaw off at point-blank range, and in the American Genesis version, Todd's waist-deep in alien blood, grabbing one by the eye stalk, looking like a total badass as he shoots another one with his water gun. And that's not censorship. You actually do fight all the slime aliens in the game with a squirt gun, and now you're starting to realize that this is just Super Mario Sunshine. At the time, there were a lot of reasons to love Slime World. The early 90s were all about slime. Thanks to the popularity of the TV series, You Can't Do That on Television, which was then taken a step further by Nickelodeon Studios by integrating slime into everything they possibly could. Reviews for Slime World were positive for the most part. It got plenty of praise from gaming outlets, though you could say it was divided. One EGM reviewer awarded it an 8 out of 10, but another EGM reviewer gave it a 4 out of 10. As for what people are saying about Todd's Adventure in Slime World now, nothing. No one is talking about Todd's Adventure in Slime World. Although I will say this about it, I am getting really tired of constantly staring at the color green. Though I do suddenly want to buy some GAC.
What is GAC?
GAC is great stuff. Oozy. GAC is stretchy.
You can pull it. Make GAC sounds.
How rude.
Suck it up and squirt it out with a GAC back. Pump it up and blow it up with a GAC inflator.
Well, I never.
Nickelodeon GAC comes in different colors, sizes, and playsets, each sold separately. Coming soon from Mattel.
Disgusting!
Not to make you stare at more green, but another game released this week for the SNES is Super Soccer Champ from Taito. Super Soccer Champ is a soccer or football game for the Super Nintendo, only with faster-paced arcade-style action. Think something closer to Tecmo Bowl than, say, FIFA. In fact, even has little cutscenes that play anytime you score a goal, like Tecmo Bowl. Taito attempted to add authenticity to the selectable world teams by having realistic depictions of the players' faces appear in the corner, and those results can be described as the Crypt Keeper. That is the Crypt Keeper. Super Soccer Champ would go on to get sequels in Japan. Turns out that arcade-style action made it perfect for an arcade cabinet. Thus, the sequel, named Hat Trick Hero 93, released 1 year later in Japanese arcades. The series would go on to get yearly installments, ending with Hat Trick Hero S for the Sega Saturn. Super Soccer Champ's sequel was originally going to be released over here, but its US release was canceled and Hat Trick Hero 2 remains in Japan only. Despite not being all that fondly remembered, Super Soccer Champ was remade in 2021 for mobile devices, albeit with a different developer and publisher, different gameplay, different mechanics, and different teams, and you know what? I'm starting to think they just wanted to use the name. If sports aren't your thing, perhaps RPGs are. Also released this week is Cosmic Fantasy II, released June 9th, 1992, for the TurboGrafx CD. In the early to mid-90s, the SNES was the place to be for RPGs. Aside from all of the Square stuff, there was Lufia, Breath of Fire, the Quintet trilogy, and tons more. The Sega Genesis also had some good RPGs, thanks to series like Shining Force and Phantasy Star. So what did the TurboGrafx have for RPGs? Well, it had Cosmic Fantasy II. For the time, Cosmic Fantasy II was fairly impressive, being the first RPG to have fully animated cutscenes with voice acting, though it's aged about as well as you expect. Despite the presentation, the gameplay of Cosmic Fantasy II is incredibly basic. You know how in every other RPG, enemies have all kinds of attacks and spells, you have to worry about what your enemy's gonna do and what spells or special moves they're gonna do? Well, in Cosmic Fantasy II, you don't. All enemies, including every single boss, will only use a basic attack. And there is no such thing as critical hits or even missing. Battles also harken back to an already dated look, being more like Dragon Quest I several years after the fact. Add a high random encounter rate and you got a game that really shows its age. This was also on the TurboGrafx CD, which means every single time you got into an encounter, you would have to wait for that CD to spin just to load the battle and the music. But hey, it's got those cutscenes. Cosmic Fantasy II caused a lot of confusion because where was Cosmic Fantasy 1? The rest of the Cosmic Fantasy series never left Japan, and 2 only made it over to the West thanks to the publisher Working Designs. From what we could gather, allegedly there was going to be a release for Cosmic Fantasy 3 here, but those plans fell through. As was the style for Japanese games at the time, we got a very different box art for the English release. The Japanese box art for Cosmic Fantasy II shows the actual characters as they appear in the cutscenes, whereas the American box art, it looks like a middle schooler borrowed a How to Draw High Fantasy book from their school library. This wasn't the only thing that was changed in the English version. Originally, the main character Rim had instances of giving the middle finger, which was removed. They also changed the ending theme by slightly adjusting some notes and re-recording the vocals so it sounds more like a power ballad, which that alone is worth listening to. Upon release, Electronic Gaming Monthly gave praise to Cosmic Fantasy II, although one reviewer did say that it could use some spunk and attitude. However, in the EGM Buyer's Guide 1992 awards, the best RPG of the year of all the consoles was given to Cosmic Fantasy II, saying that it has a huge world, dozens of cinemas, and realistic sounding voice, and that it blows all other RPGs away to date. This means that EGM thought Cosmic Fantasy II was better than, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, Arcana, Ultima Underworld, Soul Blazer, Final Fantasy, Mystic Quest, why not? Reviews used to make no sense at the time. However, Cosmic Fantasy II did appeal to owners of the TurboGrafx CD. In fact, the game sold in an almost 1-to-1 ratio with the TurboGrafx CD unit itself. In 2009, publisher Sunsoft, best known for games like Blaster Master, announced that they had acquired all of Telenet's catalog, and they teased a potential re-release of the Cosmic Fantasy series. But that was also 13 years ago, so I wouldn't get your hopes up. This week, I counted 1 SNES game, 1 NES game, 1 Game Boy game, 2 Genesis games, 1 TurboGrafx CD game, and 1 Lynx game for a total of 7 games released this week in 1992. I love seeing all these color slices. Over in the collector's corner, Todd's Adventure in Slime World hasn't seen too much of a value increase. A loose copy goes for just under $40, while a complete one is just over $100, which is not too shabby. Super Soccer Champ is now worth just $10 for a loose cartridge, and the complete box is right at $65, which for a sports title, that's pretty impressive. In a very surprising twist, the US version of Cosmic Fantasy II is the most valuable one. For whatever reason, the value of the Japanese version is practically non-existent. You can get the complete package for just over $5. Meanwhile, the US version has just the CD loose at a value of $57 and a complete value of just under $75. If I had to guess, it's because only 20,000 copies were ever sold. And that's it for today. Next week, one of many Simpsons game, a futuristic football game, and a Sega Genesis real-time strategy game. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. Please like the video and subscribe if you aren't already, and thank you if you already are, and be sure to leave a comment down below. And as an extra treat for you, the back of the box of Cosmic Fantasy II even says, what's more, the true RPG-style combat interface will put you right in the action. What are you waiting for? A better game.